Slow, fast? All right. How about this funky stuff? Let's take a look. What's this funky stuff? What is this?
Looks like refresh.
No, not this green one. This pink one.
Fruit roll-up.
So actually, if you go over here, oh, it doesn't have it. Weird. It's actually an option. It lets you create what they call roll-up. And roll-up, oh, that doesn't even have it here. That sucks. It's basically a way to create similar shortcuts as we did with click and wait. So if you have two commands that you're always using together, you're just always using together, like you're always saying, wait for text, then select. Wait for text, then select. You can actually create a shortcut for yourself that says wait for and select. And whenever you say that one command, it will actually mean two commands. Make sense? That's what the roll-up is. It's a way to do it in the thing. Honestly, guys, I don't teach it because I've never had to use it. It takes too much time, but it's an option. You can go and read documentation about it if you want to. There's also a thing called UI elements here, and some people do use it, and I'll explain what it is in like 2 sentences or less. When you're testing a website that wasn't built to be tested, what does that mean? It means none of the elements on the page have a unique ID or a unique name or any kind of unique attribute. So you only have one option of locating them, and that's these long XPath strings. It's very hard to keep track of what corresponds to what in your code, right? So when you record your code, you're going to look at it, and all the locators are going to be essentially gibberish to you as a human, right? Especially when they're really wrong. You don't even know what's at the end. You're going to have to keep scrolling. There is a way to create an XML document that you can attach with your script to your IDE or eventually to your programming language that you export to Java, Python, whatever. And it actually lets you map the XPath to a human-readable string, okay? So for example, you have a submit button. It doesn't have an ID or a name or anything prettier about it, so like a CSS you can locate by, or a class, or any attributes at all. It's just weird thing that has nothing unique about it. You can actually take the XPath to it, stick it in an XML file, and say submit button on login page. And then from then on, every time you are in the script, you can actually say target submit button on login page. And your UI element will know how to go to the XPath, will know how to go to your XML document to retrieve the XPath that corresponds to it. So that means your script will look a lot nicer for you, the human, but essentially you're still using XPaths. It's just, you know, prettier. Make sense to everybody? Okay, I kind of mentioned already a little bit that XPaths are fragile. Do you guys understand why they're fragile? You guys know? I'm going to do a lot of this, but let's do a little logical exercise. Very logical exercise. Let's draw a web page. Okay? What does a web page usually look like?
Header, footer.
You have your title, you have your body, then you have your table. There might be a button inside here. You might have another table here, and you might have another little paragraph over here, and another button over here, right? Tell me how I can get to my button. Don't be fancy, just tell me. Like you would tell your, I don't know, best friend how to get to your house. Let's pretend this is a house. I live here. How do you get to my house?
You cover your mouse.
Body, table, and the button.
Okay, all right, fine. So first I have to be in the HTML document. HTML. Then you said, what do I have to do? Go to the body, right? Body. What's next?
Table.
All right, table. What's next?
Column.
The column?
Or like
Button.
value.
Cell? Like what?
Probably button.
Bottom right.
This is a house.
Bottom right.
Okay.
This is a house.
It's third row, third column.
Let's mess this up a little. Hold on. I live here. That's me over here. This is where I live.
On the right.
I have a square head.
Second row, third column.
So what floor do I live on?
Second.
All right, so don't you need to get up to my floor that I live on in order to get to my apartment? Because if you walk on the first floor and knock on the apartment, I'm not going to be there, right? So I need to get to the second floor first. So that means TR, what? TR what? TR2, all right. And then what happens? I'm in the second floor, what do I do?
Third room.
The first door I see?
Third row.
My neighbor is very angry at you. What do I do?
Keep walking. Walking with the third.
Just knock on every door?
Third column.
Probably third column.
So I go to the third what? It's not a column, it's a
Second row.
TD,
third column.
it's an apartment.
Yeah.
Alright. TD. 3. Alright, and I'm actually, I'm a roomie. I live in a room inside the TD. There's another person that's sharing with me. See how I'm in a little room? So this is a multi-bedroom apartment, and I actually live in one of the rooms. It's called a link, A. What do I do? So I got to the apartment. What should you do now? You want to go to my room. You want to see me. You don't want to see my roomie. You want to see me. What do you do? So you would go /A, for example, right? Or /P or / whatever, the tag name. So far, so good? All right. Oops. They just decided to add another house right in front of ours. What happens?
Expand.
Table doesn't.
So that's table.
You don't know which table.
Expand.
Let's make it even more complex.
The path is.
They added a 2-story house right in front of mine. Ruins my view. What?
The expand is not correct.
It's not right anymore. If I still give the same directions to my friends to get to my house, where do they end up?
You end up in the first.
Probably the first one.
They're not happy. Right? They end up there. Why do they end up there? Because they're going to go to the first table, not the second table anymore. Right? So I already broke my XPath. Okay, fine. Well, sometimes people don't really add tables to a website too often. What do they usually do more often than that? Whoops! Now, as you know, in HTML, we actually count from the top to the bottom, right? Humans count floors from the bottom up. But in HTML, we're actually counting down. So that means I'm not on the second floor. I'm on the third floor now. Okay? That kind of sucks. Again, they went to the wrong apartment, right? We decided to get a third roomie. That broke my XPath. See what I mean? Basically, every single level, except HTML or body, you can't have 2 bodies, but there is a chance for you to break your XPath. XPath is very fragile. That's why if you're going to use XPath, you usually want to attach it to something unique. You want to start from something unique. Like, for example, my table has a unique ID. Unique. Right? So if I have a table that's unique, I can actually start my XPath from here. And instead of saying table 1 or table 2 or table 3, I can actually say table at ID unique and do it that way. Okay? So even though this is not unique and that's not unique and that's not unique, I can attach it to something that's unique and then keep going. That means no matter how many tables that they add in front or below, I'm at least going to be able to find that table. If they still add some additional rows, I'm still going to be messed up. But at least it's one little level that I remove the breaking points.
I had a question. You said you had a link, right? There's a link to
you write an A, so you could also use K at href equals to your address.
You could, and in fact, actually, Selenium lets you look by link text.
Yeah.
So if you have a unique text on the link, like you don't have 6 links that all have the same text, like click me, click me, click me, click me, or click here. Some people like to say link, click here, right?
Yeah.
You can actually say link equals and the text of the link. But sometimes it's possible to have an image that's actually a link, so you can't really do by image, link image.
No, I'm saying
So
like
there's
your
different.
href, when you want A, like your / your A mean that this is the link, right? And inside your brackets you have at href.
Yeah, exactly.
Equals
Yeah, that's, like I
address.
said, yeah, that's
And it'll
absolutely
go
right.
directly to you,
Yeah.
right?
Unless, of course, your href is going to be changing a lot.
Yeah.
Anyways,
yeah,
there's-
dynamically, right?
You guys get the picture though, right?
Yeah.
The longer the XPath, the more fragile. Everybody understands?
Yeah.
So that means if your application is not designed to be testable, even if you do UI elements, you make it more readable, you don't make it more durable. Okay? All right, moving on. Oh, yay, my favorite. All right, so the log view. You guys understand what I'm talking about when I say the log view? Let's take a quick look. This part on the bottom, the one that tells you all this wonderful stuff over here, that's the log view. Now the log view actually has several levels of information reporting. And there's a little button over here, it has a drop down. You can select info is your default, but you also have warn, and you also have error. Don't go to debug yet, we're gonna get to that, okay? So if you select error, you only see errors. If you select warn, you get warnings and errors. If you select info, you get info, warnings, and errors. So it's kind of like a builds on the previous one. Now debug is a beast of a whole different sort. If you're feeling like sitting and staring at your computer for a little bit, go ahead and switch to debug. I'm going to show you what happens. Oh, that was actually faster than I expected. But anyways, that's what it looks like. You guys see that? That's a lot of information. You don't want to leave it in debug mode. Frankly, you're not going to see anything useful because there's going to be so much stuff that is not. The way you use debug mode is usually you will clear everything and you will just execute one line. For example, okay, just one line. That way you only get debug information for that one line. And you can somewhat go through it in a logical, organized manner. If you actually try to play a script and have all the debug information, it's going to be too much to sort through. So just get to the line you're interested in, do a breakpoint, get to there, clear your log, set it to debug mode, clear it so it's blank, play just that one line, do whatever it is you need to do with that debug information, and then set it back to info. Make sense? So that kind of gives you a demo of what it does. All right, reference. Reference is your best friend, truly. So for example, I don't really know what select frame does, right? I can select it and go to the reference tab, and it's going to tell me what it does. It's also going to tell me what I need to put into the first column, and it's going to tell me any examples or shortcuts or workarounds or bugs that it knows about. So lots of times students will ask me, is there a nice location where I can see all the description of all the commands? Yeah, in the next PowerPoint I'm going to give you a link. It has exactly the same information as here. Basically the Selenium community wrote this stuff, they put it inside the reference tab, and then they pasted the same thing online. So instead of going to a browser and looking this thing up, you can just go to the reference tab. Same thing. Yes, wonderful. Okay. I know I'm going pretty fast, but if I'm going too fast, you can slow me down. Or if you have questions, let me know. Okay, so the menu. You have your file. it's split into two sections. You have your test case related stuff on top, your test suite related things on the bottom, and you just have some in middle things like add test case and properties. This is actually new and apparently it doesn't work. Awesome. Okay, so properties doesn't work. It works for you? That's all. Hold on. What does your properties do?
There's page property.
Get the file on timeout. It is asking for the file and it's running on.
Hey. Yeah, I don't even know what that is.
Those are the title of your test case.
Oh, you can change it? Is that what it's doing? Something new they added. Anyways, you probably will never use it. What you should know is that if you want to do something to a test case, either save it or rename it, meaning save as, or export it to a language, such as Java or Python, you do it with the controls on top, okay? If you want to do similar things to a test suite, that means save the collection that you have inside this box, or export the suite from that box, you do it here. Okay, that's all you have to remember. So just don't get confused. Okay, next menu, edit. I don't think it requires too much explanation. Copy, paste, select, delete. Actions. They used to not have this menu at all. They just recently added it. But again, very self-explanatory. You get your context menu essentially. Now options. Options is the one I do want to talk about. You have your reset IDE window. That means if something gets stuck with your IDE, that happens sometimes. You're trying to debug and it's just not cooperating. You can reset it without closing and opening. You also have your clipboard format and you have your format. Now, some of you don't have your format enabled, so you may try to do this, but you're not going to see any options show up. It just depends. If you do have it enabled, what happens is you can actually select a different format and view it instead of HTML. So for example, I'm going to select JUnit4 WebDriver backed. And I can see how it's going to look in the source. You guys see that? Yeah? So it converted it to Java. And then I can do exactly the same thing and say, well, I want to see it now in Python. And here's Python. Okay? You might not have it. It's fine.
So let me ask you, you can write a test kit into Ruby, you can say I can't.
And this comes with a little caveat. You cannot convert from one language to another. You can only convert from HTML to a language. And once you convert it to a language, if you added any additional lines to that, you cannot convert back to HTML, and you're kind of stuck. You can't really do anything to it. You can discard your changes, or you won't even be able to save. So you're kind of in a bad state. That's why they now made this optional, and you have to enable it, because most people were like getting really frustrated. So that's what the format is. It lets you see what you will get if you export the file to a specific language. Essentially, you will get to preview on your screen in IDE exactly what you will get if you say test case, export as, and then save that file as whatever. PL, Java. Yeah. Having said all of that, as you can see, when I am in a different format than HTML, my table tab is disabled, right? So the only way for me to get back to my table view is to set my format back to HTML. And then I can switch back to table. Okay? Not only that, but what I just said a second ago is if I'm in a different format and I make changes, and it can be something very minor, like // Well, actually, this might work. Let me see. It might not. Ah, yes. Look what happened. Whoops! Did you see that? What happened? I made a tiny little change. What happened to my code?
Plus HTML.
Yeah, pretty much. So that's why it's optional now, because once it's gone, you're kind of screwed. All right? Okay, let me reopen something here.
I'm sorry, can you shoot it again, please?
Oh, shoosh. By the way, you guys, I know it's almost break time, so be patient. I know everyone's tired. In 20 minutes, I'll send you out for 20 minutes, okay? So just be patient. Bear with me. Yeah, I'm talking as fast as I can. All right. So what's the difference then between format and clipboard format? They sound very similar, don't they? But what happens if you select something from the clipboard format? Go ahead, try to select something from clipboard format. Anything, select anything. Let's do C#. Did anything happen? You mean it doesn't work? What does clipboard mean? When you copy, where does the actual copy thing go before you paste it?
RAM.
To the clipboard. Yeah, RAM. I mean, yes. Synonyms. Yes. So clipboard is another way to say RAM, right? It goes to the memory. So essentially, what you're telling it is, if you copy certain lines of HTML, how do you want them to actually be stored in which format on the clipboard? And this is really cool. I use a lot of this for work. When I actually just I'm too lazy to convert something in my head, I will actually report something in HTML and I'll be like, I want it in Java, clipboard format Java. And then I just copy several lines. So for example, I want to copy these couple lines, like this. Control C. I'm going to go to my notepad. My notepad, where are you? And I'm going to paste it. Did I paste HTML? No, I didn't paste HTML. Let's do another experiment. I'm going to set my clipboard format to HTML, and I'm going to copy again. You have to copy again. You can't just paste, paste, paste. You have to copy each time. So you're going to Control C again.
But it's not selected yet.
Huh?
You haven't selected it yet.
Oh, it's selected. It's there. I hope it's there at least. No, I guess you're right. How do I enable it then? Oh, now it's disabled again. Control C.
It's the same thing.
There we go. It's HTML, right? Let's do it again. I want it in Java. Let's do remote control. All right? Pretty handy, I gotta say. So it's actually very useful because you see what kind of HTML you're copying it, right? And then you get the actual version of it in the language. So it's pretty cool.
You select it and select the...
Yeah, you just select the HTML, but you paste a different language. It's like magic. So that's the clipboard format. I usually like to set it back to default so that I don't get all messed up at some point. But if you leave it, it's fine too. It doesn't really impact what you see, just what you paste. Okay, last one thing we have to go over from IDE, and that's the options. So please, everybody, go to options. Everybody gets to do this. Even if you are completely tired and you don't care, you have to do it. Okay, so the first selection is your encoding support. So there are two different types of encoding that Selenium supports, and that's UTF-8 and UTF-16. What's the difference? Why would you ever want to use UTF-16?
Supports a 64-bit system.
You are testing a web application that uses what language? Well, Russian you can get away with UTF-8. Mandarin. Good, yeah. I think Arabic is also, you might be good. Who knows? Do we have any Arabic-speaking people? No?
Yes.
I know Mandarin for sure, but I thought Arabic as well, but don't quote me on it. So yeah, if you're using something that is not Latin character-based or Slavic, Cyrillic character-based, then you want to use UTF-16 most of the time. Second one, second input field. That's your default wait period. So every time you do click and wait, you wait for a specific amount of time, right? Or every time you say wait for text, like we did in our homework, you wait for a specific amount of time. This is where you get to set that value. Now by default it's 30,000, which stands for 30,000 milliseconds. What does milli mean? Like a millimeter. It means thousand. Right. So basically you take that number, you remove the 3 zeros, and that's how many seconds you get. I have mine set to 45 seconds for this classroom specifically. In the real world, you really shouldn't need more than 10 seconds, but here, 45 is a good number. Okay, next field. That's when we learn about user extensions, when we learn how to add additional functionality, additional commands to our Selenium. That's where we're going to add the JavaScript file. Okay, remember how I mentioned last week that we can extend Selenium? If Selenium doesn't have certain functionality, we can add it. Yeah, that's where we're going to do it later. Selenium Id Extensions. There's actually a whole bunch of them online. You can Google them. They let you change the colors that your errors appear. They let you add additional buttons. They let you change the background from gray to pink with polka dots. It's basically anything that affects the look of your IDE. Not the functionality of Selenium, but the look of your actual application, of your plugin. Okay? And then you have your default checkboxes. Notice how one of the boxes that I have selected says record assert title automatically. So how I always say, oh, please assert the page title, please assert the page title, please assert the page title. If you check this, you never have to do it again. It will do it for you automatically. On every new page, it's going to assert the page title by default.
But it's going to click and wait on that. It's going to wait before starting.
No, it's just every time it knows it's on a new page, it just asserts the title for you. The clicking and waiting, you're still going to have to do yourself. Okay, what's the difference between, actually, let's do this. What is base URL?
The home page.
The page where you start.
Not really. What is base URL? Base, not
Okay.
URL, but base.
The symbol,
It's the actual domain, pretty much. It's the very base without any of those folders and slashes. It's the domain itself only. So you're basically telling your Selenium IDE, when you're recording, do you want it to also store the base domain that you start from? Okay?
Of course.
And if it stores the base domain, that means it's actually, you don't have to remember the absolute path to every single new page, right? You can just remember the relative path. That is why when you take a look, let me just navigate away from this for a second. When you take a look at your script, the first line is actually /login PHP. You guys notice that? It's not HTTP, :/ yada yada. It's just /login because it actually remembered your base URL on top. You guys saw that? And in fact, if you change this to anything, for example, right here, and you try to play this code, what's going to happen? Kaboom is going to happen, right? Because it's going to type in that as base URL, and then this as relative to that base URL is not going to work. Make sense to everybody?
Exactly, it's the login page. Look.
So, having said that, let me go back over here. This option and this option, the third one, are kind of mutually exclusive. Does that make sense? Because if you're remembering the base, why do you also need to remember the absolute URL for everything, right? Because you basically can just say relative to the base every time. It's also a little bit nicer because if you're going to run something against production and against development environment, and they just happen to have a different base URL, but the relative paths are all the same, right? It's just the server you're deploying on is going to be different. It might be easier to change it in one place than to change it in every single location, right? So most of the time you will actually do it this way, but sometimes you might actually want to store something in an absolute way for whatever reason. and then you can enable it. So these, the first one and the third one are mutually exclusive. Activate developer tools. If you don't have that enabled, you can, but you don't get anything fancy. You just get that refresh icon. So right next to my pink curly one, you saw me have the green curly one. That's the developer tool. Ooh. Right? Very exciting. So you just get the refresh. Enable experimental features. I'm not even sure what that enables or disables. You guys can play around with it and figure out.
The format changing.
Oh, the format? Okay, I guess they call it experimental now. It's actually been around since the very
They did
first.
that because of the potential losing exception.
Ah, okay. Why is it experimental? I still don't get.
Because it doesn't work right now.
Okay, all right. So it's a polite way of saying it doesn't work right, so it's experimental. And then the last part is if you want your record button to be enabled when you open up. So some people like to press the record button themselves. Some people like to have it already recorded because they want to be ready to go. It's a matter of preference. You get to choose what you want. Okay? If you are annoyed by the fact that every time you open it, it's already recording, disable it. Then you're going to have to click it. That's fine. Okay, so that's the first one. Let's take a look at the second tab. How does this wonderful magic of converting HTML to a language happen? It's simply a template, okay? It's a template that somebody just like you sat down and wrote. And what they basically said is, they said, if you see this command, replace it with this code. If you see this command, replace it with this code. And they did it for every single command. And then they said, if you see this command is going to have a value and a second value. So you're going to replace it with this code and insert that value into this place and that value into this place. Okay, so they're basically doing this template of how to convert one line at a time. Sometimes when you export certain code into a different language, you're going to get little comments that are going to say, error, this hasn't been implemented, or we don't know how to do this. It's just because somebody did not implement the little template for that specific line of code. That's all it means. So, no magic, it's just a whole bunch of hard work that somebody went in and did, one line at a time. But if you are going to do a lot of exporting, let me see if I can do an example. Yeah, if you're going to do a lot of exporting, and you, for example, always wanted to automatically import a certain package for you, right? So every time you export, you see that you end up manually adding a certain package. And then you end up adding another certain package, every time manually. You can actually modify the template and add your own import statement. So just like it says here, I can say, okay, I want to add another line. Oh, it's not letting me edit. Okay, sorry, it's not letting me edit this one, but you can go from the hard code and just add an extra line to your template. And then every time you export from then on, you'll get that extra line. So you can actually make your own changes. Unfortunately, they keep updating this UI, so you used to be able to change it right in here, but now you actually have to go externally to find the library and do it externally. It's possible though, trust me. I used to show it, but now I have to figure out how to do it. Okay, plugins. Plugins is, in my case, formatters. But you can also install other plugins to your Selenium IDE that like let you, what's a popular one? It gives you like debugger for your script. Like it actually will find problems for you. It will highlight the lines that don't work correctly. There's another one that adds several buttons that let you, instead of using Firebug and recording a locator, you can actually use something that looks like Firebug from your Selenium ID and record a locator, post back. There's like a whole bunch of funky stuff. But it's basically stuff you can add to your ID. And then this one you already saw, right? Locator builders. That's the one we messed around last week. You guys remember this one? So let's review. There are multiple ways to locate an item on the page. You guys agree? And Selenium has a built-in logic of which one it chooses above something else. So it says, okay, I see 10 different ways to look up an item on the page. which one would you like me to use as my top priority, and which one would you like me to avoid like fire, right? And you put them in a specific order, and that's what it's going to use as its rule of thumb, right? So if it says, okay, I have an ID, I have a link, I have a CSS, and I have a page reference, right? Which one would it use if it has all four? The ID, right? And if it didn't have an ID, the next one it would use is the link. So it would just go on the priority. So you can move these around however you feel comfortable. Move these so that you feel happy.
Question?
Yes?
Along those lines. Remember you were talking that as you change the structure of the page, if you use relative paths, it messes you up. Now, are some of those other locator builds less error prone than XPath?
We're actually going to talk extensively about this next week, I believe. But, in short, ID is what you always want to aim for. There's a lot of actual HTML and XML validators that people can run on the page now that make sure that ID has to be unique. In fact, if you ever see a page where there's two items with the same ID, that's a bug, you have to file it. But most people who create websites now, they will actually automatically run a verifier on the page. So if you have something with a unique ID, use that. Because even if somebody takes that item and moves it to this side and then to this side, and makes it green and makes it bigger and makes it smaller and replaces it with a picture and changes the text, as long as the ID is the same, you can find it. Unless they completely remove it off the page, and then you have a bigger issue. So, also keep in mind, unfortunately with code, as development progresses, eventually you will have to maintain it. Let's rephrase. Eventually you will have to go back and tinker with it. You're going to have to change it, update it, completely remove it and replace it with something else. That's kind of a fact of life. How often you have to do that, that depends on your locator.
What if you download the latest version of ID?
Huh?
What if you download the latest version of ID?
Then what?
Maybe the open source developers already make adjustments. So
It's not about adjustments. It's like I said, it's about what kind of locator you use for the element. If you use an XPath, right? And I added a different table to my web page, there's nothing that the Selenium can do to help you. They can't predict when you're going to have something added or removed, right? Or if you use the text of a link, it used to say log in, right? Together. And then your PM decided, you know what, they look better separate, as in log space capital IN, right? So that text will no longer match. So again, you're going to have to go in and change it. But if your link had an ID, or your table, or your cell, or your picture had an ID, it doesn't matter what they did to it. As long as the ID is intact, you can still find it. So the most stable thing to use is an ID. And if you're the kind of guy or girl who works in the company who is willing to listen to QA input, and you're the kind of person who is willing to provide the input, really try to get your developers to put in IDs. As many as possible. Unique ones. Non-dynamic ones, unique, non-dynamic ones. And then it just makes your code better. Actually, I just started working for a startup, and we're in the process of going through and adding IDs. Unique ones. It's kind of a pain. But once it's done, it makes you happy. Because things are more stable. Okay. It is break time. How do you guys feel about that? Yay! Okay, so, and you guys can ask me any questions if you need to. If we still have time left over, we'll go into pattern matching. We're a little bit behind, so we might not get to it today. In that case, next week. Okay, so types of commands. You got your action commands, which perform an operation on the UI, or retrieve values from the UI. Can you kind of think of an example of a command that retrieves a value from a UI?
Store.
Yeah, very good. You have your verifications. Basically anything that starts with verify, right? What's that?
would you mind explaining, I mean, it kind of makes sense why we do we verify, but would you mind explaining it again? Why do we need to verify things overall to begin with?
Versus assert, or in general?
In general. Why do we need to verify?
Why do you do testing?
I mean, just to find an errors, but when you verify, you're not looking for the errors. I mean, it's...
Yes, you are.
I think-
That's what you're doing. Verifying is basically checking for an expected condition. When you perform a test case, why do you perform it? No, literally, I'm asking a question.
Yeah,
Why
sure,
do you
just
perform
to,
a
just
test
to see,
case?
To find the error.
to see expected results.
No, it's not to find an error. It's to do what?
Check it.
To check that, what?
The requirement is
The
that.
expected is still there, right? That what you expect to see does indeed still happen, right? Still occur. Versus, whoops, the unexpected happened. Or, whoops, I expected this to be there and it's not, right? So when we automate, whenever we say verify, we're essentially cementing the acceptance criteria, right? The expected result. We're cementing it. We're saying, I expect this word to always be in this location. And if it's not, fail.
Thank you.
You also have your assertions. Again, let's reiterate the difference between verification and assertion. What's the difference? What's the difference?
Should be there.
When we verify, what does that mean?
To check the
Expected
result.
should be.
That means, okay, we expect this to happen, but if it doesn't happen, then what?
It's okay.
Then we can still continue, right? It doesn't actually impact anything that comes after, right? But when we assert, it means what? It means that if this is not there, it actually does have a huge impact on every line that comes after. That means it's really not even worth to keep going, right? Now what you will notice is actually in the JUnit, once we export, there is no verify. There's only assert. Verify is actually a concept specific to Selenium, okay? In any kind of language, they just have asserts. So they think that if something failed, it's just bad. And if you're asserting multiple things, well then fix whatever was broken and then run the test again to see if everything else passes or not. So it's kind of a different thing. Okay, action commands. There are 3 types of action commands. So there's 3 types of commands in general, right? Actions, verifications, and assertions. But just in action commands, there are 3 types. There are, whoops, where are you going? No. Okay, sorry, I don't know what happened. Let me just, there we go. There is a simple action. So a simple action would be something like click, right? That's a simple action, or type, or select. There are wait actions, and there's different types of waits. There is perform an action and wait, which means and wait for the page to load. Or there's just simple wait fors. And you can wait for a lot of different things. You can wait for text, you can wait for an element to become visible, or you can wait for something to become enabled or disabled. You can wait for a specific value to show up. So yeah, a lot of things. You can even wait for a specific attribute even. And of course, store. We kind of have a little bit of a taste of store, right? You guys stored values today. But you can also store text, and you can also store evals. Now, evals are a special beast, and we're going to talk about them later. But an eval is a way to actually perform some kind of equation or execute a certain amount of code, and then to store the result of that. Okay, we kind of did already this. So this should all be very familiar, repetitive content. Okay. And of course, all of you have experience with this now. If you can't find something in the quick access menu, go all the way to the bottom and you will see a much bigger list. Alright, so we again have all of this stuff. You guys know about autocomplete, right? Have you guys seen the whole list in the autocomplete? Let's take a quick look. So if I just select the line and I don't type anything, I can still see the list. It's actually pretty long. There's a lot of commands. They're organized alphabetically. Now, those commands can be broken down into 12 categories. Well, technically 14 categories, but we're gonna exclude the other two because the other two are assertions and verifications, okay? So we're just gonna talk about actions today. The action commands can be split into 12 command categories. They are Selenium Control commands, browser operation commands, cookie options, pop-up box operations, checkbox and radio button commands, list and drop-down commands, edit fields, keyboard operations, mouse operations, form operations, which is actually just one command, and Windows element selection / Selenium accessors. Okay, so that's a lot of stuff to remember. We're going to go over them one at a time. Selenium controls. Okay, so all of these commands let you control Selenium. Not the browser, not anything within the browser or your web application, but the actual Selenium itself. Now let's look at the first one. It says set timeout. That's the same thing as you going to options, and using that field that says milliseconds, remember timeout, and setting it manually in the options. From the script, you can actually change the value in that field. Make sense to everybody? And just like you change it in that box once, and it changes for all the rest of the commands from that script, if you call this from your script, it changes it for the rest of the commands in the script. So if you want to change it back, you're going to have to call it again and set it back. Set, yeah.
Just, can you concatenate that command along with like a click or type command to one command?
So in this case, no, but there are going to be, let's look at the next line. See how on the next slide on the bottom it says star means Selenium also provides and wait command? So that means anytime you see pause, you can actually, anytime you see run script, you can say run script and wait. Anytime you see wait for, this is a bad one, select, you can say select and wait. Okay, so anything with a star, it means you can say and wait.
And then you can set the timeout, the wait time in the value field.
One more time.
How do you set the wait time, the amount of time it should wait?
Okay, so as you can see, set time doesn't have an asterisk. So you can't say set time and wait. You can say set time, and then you can say click and wait, and then you can say set time and set it back to whatever it was.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, what about the set speed command? Can you slow it down deliberately where you can follow exactly all the strokes you see as you play?
Okay, so set mouse speed or set speed?
Set speed.
So it's the same thing. It's the same thing as moving that thing on top of your IDE.
Just slow.
If you want to make it
Too
slow.
slow or too fast, right?
How about set mouse speed?
Mouse speed is actually in number of pixels per, I don't remember if it's per second or millisecond. Per second? If you type this command in and you go to the reference tab, it should tell you if milliseconds or seconds. But essentially, it's just how fast the mouse moves across the screen. And this operation will actually only be important for things like drag and drop or mouse at. For things like click, it will not make a difference because a click actually is not done with a mouse in Selenium. It actually just simulates an event on the operation. You won't actually see the mouse move. If you want to simulate a mouse move, like you're performing an actual pickup, drag to a location, and drop, then you would actually modify the mouse speed. Add location strategy. That's a funky one. It basically lets you, the one thing I can think of when this was useful was when we had some dynamically created content on the page, and in order to locate it, we actually had a formula that we were running in order to actually point to the correct thing at whatever time. So what you can do here is you can actually store a formula for locating things. And then you can give that formula a name. And so every single time you want to use that location strategy instead of a locator, so you would set this up once and later you would just refer to a location strategy. So like a formula rather than the actual locator. I know that makes no sense, but if the content is dynamically constantly placed on the page, like right now the article appears here and in 10 minutes it might be a little bit lower, and then in another 10 minutes it moves to the second column because it's like time-based. How do you find that article? So if you have a formula that actually lets you calculate where it is depending on time, you would actually just say, click, put in the formula. And the formula will say, okay, I want you to click this pixel instead of that pixel. Or it will tell you, oh, okay, the location is here. So that's the location strategy. It's kind of a funky one that you don't use too often. But it's basically store a formula, give it a name, and then next time you want to perform an operation, you refer to the formula instead of a locator.
How about we move to the item with the number of tabs?
I'm sorry?
The tabs? The tabs
I don't know about tabs. Another like one which you would use it for is sometimes you have, you guys know on eBay sometimes when you shop there's like this slider on the bottom, like the items move but they're all clickable. You guys ever seen that? So like, how do you click one of them and not the other one? Like it's a time, right? They kind of float as time goes on. So you can calculate, you can actually say, okay, 5 seconds passed. That means click here, not here, right? Because it's moved over. So it's like that's what you would use something like this for. Honestly, I have no idea what you would use this for. So I'm gonna skip it, and you guys can look it up, but I have no idea. Native XBAD. Ignore attributes without value. There is a command that says get attributes, or there's a command that says get attribute value. So basically, if you are looking at a tag, inside that tag, it's possible to set things like width and height, reference, class. You guys kind of familiar with HTML? All of those are attributes, right? So sometimes something is implied, especially when you're using a tool to create HTML. Some of those attributes will actually be put in, but they will be empty. They will have 2 double quotes and nothing between them, okay? So when you ask Selenium to return all the attributes, it will return all of them, including the ones that are empty. But if you set this guy, if they are empty, they will be ignored. So they will not even be returned because there's no value there, okay? Even though they're part of HTML. Assign ID is a fake way to assign an ID to something. So if you have certain XPath, CSS, whatever it is on the page, and you just find that you're going to be going to this whole, to this item on the page a lot during your test case, like you're just constantly clicking on it. And you want to assign something more unique to it, you can in the script. Capture entire page screenshot. Need I explain? You provide the file name, and some options here. Okay, so that was all for Selenium. Some other things are Echo. I actually use a lot of Echo for debugging, and I'm going to show you later how to use it. It's basically a way to print something to the console. In your case, to print it to the log. So you know log is where you see your errors. You can also print out, like a way that I use it is to echo what's inside a variable. Like when I store something into a variable, how do I know what's being stored? I can actually echo the variable. Pause is the same thing as clicking the pause button. Run script is a way to execute some JavaScript on your web page before actually running. So for example, what's a good example? Let's say the background of your web page changes according to what time of the day it is. So when it's like between 6 a.m. and 4 p.m., it shows yellow background. And then if it's after 4 p.m. and until 6 a.m., it shows blue background, right? So you want to check the background color in your script. Well, it's morning and you want to check what it's going to show in the evening. How do you do that? You can actually run a JavaScript on your page right before you do the verification to convince your website that it's actually 4:05 p.m. It's going to change the background, you're going to verify it, and then things are happy, right? So your script still works. So it's basically a way to inject a certain amount of code that's going to modify something on your page before you do your testing. Another thing that people usually do is they might go through and they might change certain attributes on the page, depending on some kind of script, and then do the verification. There's a whole bunch of reasons you might use it. fire event. Oops.
Now,
So
question.
yeah.
So are those controls work only, like good only for the ID or for the RC too?
Honestly, most of these are just for IDE. For RC, they have similar ones. They're just going to have a little bit of a different syntax. So they have very similar ones for RC. So you can set a timeout, but it happens a little bit differently. Like for a timeout for RC, you actually it's very easy. You can do it directly on the page. Every timeout is actually set separately, not together like here. So you wouldn't have to do it. For a run script, to inject a script, again, it's a little bit of a different syntax. You would actually have to insert it into your RC through a parameters file, rather than to just be like, ooh. On the other hand, if you're in Java, you can actually run any script at any time, right? So you might not even need to insert it. You can actually just open a second connection and just target it immediately. So there's a little bit of a syntax difference, but most of them have something comparable. Can I say that? Yeah. Yep. Okay, what am I doing? Fire event. Okay, there's this concept of events. So for example, you're working on your laptop, right? And you put your mouse over a specific part of the page and a little message opens up, right? Or a little picture displays, or a little thing pops open, right? How does it know to do that? What happened is a mouse over event got fired. So as soon as your mouse went over it, something in the program said, "Ooh, there's a mouse here, fire an event." And then that event triggered the response on the page. So if you are testing something and you just want to fire that event without actually moving the mouse there or whatever, you just want to be like, fire it, darn it, you can do that. You would just say, in this locator, pretend that there is a mouse there, fire it. Or, what's another good example? I can't even think of something, but yeah, anyways. Wait for condition, it's just like wait for text. In fact, wait for text, wait for select, wait for element present, wait for anything, fill in the blank, are all based on this. They're actually all calling wait for condition, and they're just specifying the condition. If you want to wait for something that is not pre-configured for you, you can actually use wait for condition and specify your own JavaScript something to wait for. Make sense to everybody? Okay. Wait for page to load. Need I explain? No. And wait for pop-up. Wait for pop-up is basically wait for window. But wait for an external window, that's the result of you clicking something on this page. Okay? Alright, select. You guys already ran into select once, right? Now select is special because it actually takes two locators. It doesn't take a locator and a value. It takes a locator and then the location of the option inside that element, right? So it's going to find your dropdown, and then you're going to have to tell it which location in the dropdown to actually select, right? So it's a special one, two locators. Select frame, we talked about a little bit. We're going to talk about it a little bit more later. But basically, again, it takes the frame ID in our case, or name, or whatever.